About 7 hours into the Artemis II mission, something unexpected happened, Commander. Reed Weissman, leading the 4-person crew on humanity's first lunar flyby in over half a century, discovered that even astronauts are not immune to the everyday frustrations of modern computing. He was working on his personal computing device, essentially a specialized laptop or tablet that the crew uses to manage tasks and stay in touch with mission control. These devices are crucial for the 10-day journey that would take the astronauts further from Earth than any humans had ever traveled before. During what should have been a routine check of his email, Weissman noticed something strange. He radioed Houston with a problem that countless office workers back on Earth would instantly recognize. His exact words to mission control were simple and direct, he said, and I quote, "I have 2 Microsoft Outlooks, and neither one of those are working." He then asked if Houston wanted to remote in and take a look at those 2 Outlooks, which would be awesome. Mission Control agreed to log into his device remotely. The request traveled across the vast distance between the spacecraft and Earth, a digital lifeline for a surprisingly mundane problem. This was day 1 of the planned 10-day mission, and the crew was still settling into their routine operations when the glitch appeared. The spacecraft itself was functioning beautifully, racing toward the moon at thousands of miles per hour. But the email client, that was another story entirely. So what exactly is a PCD? The acronym stands for Personal Computing Device, and it refers to the laptops and tablets that astronauts carry with them aboard the Orion spacecraft. For Artemis II, NASA selected Microsoft Surface Pro tablets to serve this role. These are essentially the same devices you could walk into a store and buy today, which might seem surprising when you think about the extreme environment of deep space. This is where NASA's philosophy of using commercial off-the-shelf software comes into play. The agency calls this approach COTS, and it reflects a practical recognition that astronauts need familiar tools to manage their daily activities, the flight systems that actually control the spacecraft, the radiation-hardened computers that guide Orion through space. Those run on completely separate hardware with rigorously tested custom software. Nothing as mundane as an email glitch could ever threaten the mission's critical operations. The PCDs serve a different purpose entirely. They handle scheduling, personal communications with family back home, and coordination among the crew members. Think of them as the astronauts' personal workspace, somewhere they can check their calendars, read messages, and organize their day. The software layer includes Windows and Outlook, because that is what the astronauts already know how to use. Training crews on familiar consumer software makes far more sense than building custom interfaces for every routine task. The beauty of this separation is that when something goes wrong with a PCD, and something always goes wrong eventually, it does not affect the spacecraft itself. The mission continues safely, while Mission Control troubleshoots the problem remotely. The resolution process began when Mission Control asked for permission to remotely access Weissman's computer. This is a pretty remarkable thing when you think about it. The spacecraft was somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 kilometers from Earth, hurtling through space at incredible speeds, and Houston was about to reach across that vast distance to take control of a laptop and fix a software problem. Weissman gave the go-ahead, and the remote session began. The troubleshooting took about an hour. During that time, its specialists back in Houston would have been examining the system, figuring out what had gone wrong, and why 2 instances of Outlook were running simultaneously. We do not have a detailed record of every step they took, but we know the outcome at around 14 hours and 20 minutes into the live stream, the capsule communicator at Mission Control gave the crew the good news they had successfully resolved the issue. Outlook was working again. But there was an interesting detail. In that update, the software would show as offline, the Capcom explained, and that was actually expected in the mission environment, with the spacecraft positioned where it was having Outlook display and offline status made perfect sense. It was not a bug, it was the correct behavior for the situation. So after an hour of remote troubleshooting from thousands of kilometers away, the problem was solved. The commander could get back to his emails, and Mission Control could move on to other things. It was a small moment in a historic mission, but it showed something important. Even when you are flying around the moon, sometimes you just need its support. The moment the livestream audio hit the internet, it took on a life of its own. A Blue Sky user named Nikki Grayson was watching the Artemis feed and caught the exact second when Commander Weissman asked Houston for help with his email problem. Grayson clipped that segment and shared it with a simple caption noting that NASA was about to remote into a computer on a spaceship. The post spread fast within hours. Thousands of people had seen it, and the reactions poured in. Grayson's own comment captured what so many people were thinking. They wrote that they were sorry NASA had sent these souls to the moon, and they were using Outlook. It was the kind of observation that lands because it points out something absurd. Here was humanity's return to lunar spaceflight, a mission decades in the making, and the astronauts were dealing with the same software that freezes on office workers in cubicles across the planet. What made the clip resonate so deeply was the sheer relatability of it. Anyone who has ever worked in a corporate environment knows the particular frustration of Outlook acting up email, not syncing the program, freezing mysterious error messages that explain nothing. These are universal experiences for millions of people, but seeing it happen to astronauts flying around the moon created a strange and wonderful contrast. The most extraordinary circumstances imaginable, and yet the mundane problems remained exactly the same. The public found comfort in this. Honestly, there is something reassuring about knowing that even highly trained astronauts on a historic mission still have to deal with recalcitrant software. It humanized the crew in a way that scripted press conferences never could. The internet briefly united around the shared experience of it. Headaches, regardless of whether you were sitting at a desk on Earth or floating in a capsule thousands of kilometers from home. While the Outlook situation was getting all the attention online, there was actually another technical issue that had happened earlier in the mission, about 2 hours into the flight. A fault light started blinking on what NASA calls the Universal Waste Management System, that is the formal name for the spacecraft's toilet. The indicator was pointing to a problem with the urine extraction fan. This fan is pretty important when you are in microgravity. Without gravity, to pull liquid down you need another way to move waste away from the body and into a collection container. The fan creates airflow that does exactly that, pulling urine into the proper storage system, so it does not float around the cabin. Nobody wants free-floating droplets in a spacecraft. In this case, the fan had jammed. One of the astronauts was able to clear whatever was causing the blockage and get it spinning again. We do not know exactly what caused the jam or which crew member performed the fix, but the repair worked. NASA confirmed that the toilet returned to operational status shortly after. It is worth noting that this happened about 2 hours into the mission, which was actually several hours before the Outlook problem cropped up. The toilet issue just did not make the same splash on social media. A jammed bathroom fan is less funny than duplicate email clients, apparently. But for the crew, having a working toilet was probably the more pressing concern. Spaceflight has always involved dealing with mundane mechanical problems in extraordinary environments, and this was just the latest example. When we chuckle at astronauts struggling with email software, it helps to remember that spaceflight has always had a complicated relationship with computers and code. The Outlook glitch was annoying, certainly, but it barely registers on the scale of historical space software failures. Back in 1962, NASA launched Mariner 1, intended to be the first spacecraft to fly by Venus, but just 293 seconds after liftoff, range safety officers sent the destruct command the rocket had veered dangerously off course. The cause was traced back to a single missing hyphen in the handwritten guidance code. One tiny mark left out, and an $18.5 million mission was lost. That translates to well over $200 million in today's money. Engineers still refer to it as the most expensive hyphen in history. The difference between then and now is striking. Mariner 1 failed because of a typo in custom mission critical code that controlled the rocket itself. The Artemis II Outlook problem happened in commercial software running on a laptop, completely separate from the flight systems that actually keep the crew safe in a strange way. That progression represents progress. The critical stuff works. The glitches have migrated to the periphery, and sometimes the memorable moments from historic missions are just weirdly mundane. During Apollo 10, the crew had to deal with floating urine globules when a waste venting procedure did not go as planned. The astronauts spent time chasing droplets of liquid waste around the cabin. These moments remind us that even the most ambitious human endeavors are still fundamentally human. Things break, procedures go sideways, and people improvise solutions.